But Twitter often in the news, often making the news. Big focus, the Westminster bubble, big focus of the British media as well. And we did see at the beginning of this week a 48-hour walkout and boycott by large numbers of politicians, media people, blue tick folks, celebrities over Twitter's failure to act on one particular account that had tweeted a whole load of anti-Semitism. This was from the grime artist Wiley, real name Richard Cowie, but known as the godfather of grime. He tweeted out last Friday an extraordinary tirade of anti-Semitic abuse. He's now facing a police investigation, but he was originally handed a 7-day ban by the social media giant for his post. Some of his posts, but not all, taken down. Big outcry from many people saying that actually they simply weren't acting quick enough when they were fully aware of how offensive a lot of these posts were. He has now been permanently suspended following that 48-hour Twitter boycott. Well, let's talk about this with Brendan O'Neill, who's editor of Spiked Online. Good morning to you, Brendan.
Hi, Julia.
And I have to say, you're one of the sensible people. You don't personally tweet online. Your articles on Spiked Online are always tweeted. And I'm on Twitter an awful lot. I've faced calls for me to be suspended for saying things which I believe, and I think most sane people believe, is totally innocuous. But a lot of people find taking offence. Well, this is kind of their new hobby. They see offence in everything. And if someone says something they don't like, they think those people should not just have their account suspended. They should be banned from a platform altogether. Now, Wiley is a difficult case. I mean, it's quite clear what he wrote, and I won't repeat a lot of these things, was, I mean, not a matter of opinion. It was anti-Semitic, and some of the interviews he's done since, anti-Semitic, clear anti-Semitic, hatred and the like. However, should he have been permanently banned from social media?
I would rather that he wasn't permanently banned. Now, you're absolutely right. What he said was straight out racism. It was anti-Jewish hatred, the things that he said. He called Jews snakes and all sorts of other unrepeatable things, really horrific racism. But I just think it's a bit of a folly to call on the head honchos of Silicon Valley to control what can and cannot be said on the internet, because the thing we have to bear in mind, I mean, firstly, there was an extraordinary double standard over Wiley in relation to Twitter. I mean, a feminist or anyone else who misgenders a trans person online can expect to be booted off and in some cases banned for life very, very quickly. Whereas with Wiley,
I was going to say misgender. So literally talking about a man who has now identified as a woman, they can still be completely, fully intact, by the way. They have simply just announced they're now a woman. And simply by using, their name John Smith as opposed to Joan Smith, that can actually engender a full ban. This has actually happened to people, we know.
Yeah, that's actually happened. People have been banned for life for referring to someone who has a penis and testicles as a man, to put it bluntly. People have been banned for life.
Tell it as it is, Brendan.
for doing that. And then you had Wiley come along and spouting classical, old-style anti-Jewish hatred, and he firstly got a slap on the wrist. And it was only really when people intervened and said it needs to be more severe that Twitter banned him permanently. But even then, so there's a double standards case, but I think banning people like this is not the answer. It's not the answer, obviously, to perfectly legitimate points of view, like questioning transgenderism. Of course, that's not the answer to that. That should be perfectly acceptable to say those things. I also think it's not the right answer to actual bigotry, because all it does is push it underground, make some people think, there's something behind his conspiracy theories because we're being banned the minute we express them. It's best to have this stuff out in the open where we can see it and where we can ridicule it.
Well, this is it. It seems to me I would much rather know that people have these views. And again, look, I wasn't the target of this, but I'm certainly the target of plenty of what people call misogyny. Again, I'm kind of say it's water off a duck's back to me, but I completely understand why the Board of Deputies of British Jews representing the Jewish community in this country said that the suspension didn't go far enough in their view. They have faced a barrage of abuse and anti-Jewish hatred. They've had to deal with it with the Labour Party, and I can absolutely understand why they're saying, up with this, we will not put any more. But there does seem to be something of a double standard on Twitter, and I do wonder whether it's like this idea that, well, if he'd have been a white person tweeting this stuff, they'd have been straight off straight away. But because he was black and he was cool, because he's a grime artist, he's on the left, for some reason he was given something of a free pass.
There's a real problem because the left and sections of the political establishment have tied themselves up in knots with the politics of identity. They don't know whether they're coming or going. And one side effect of that is if we see anti-Semitism coming from some black people, and there are some black people, not the majority by any stretch, but there are some black people, particularly in the rap industry, it must be said, who do hold certain anti-Semitic views. We know that there is an issue of anti-Semitism in sections of the Muslim community, for example, in Western Europe. Not all Muslims, but there is a problem of anti-Semitism in some sections of that community. And it becomes increasingly difficult to talk about that form of anti-Semitism, that form of racism, because people will say, oh, you're picking on black people, or you're being Islamophobic. You know, we've now reached a situation where it becomes Islamophobic to talk about anti-Semitism. And that's how messed up this whole situation has
I think
become.
people's heads while they're exploding while they eat their cornflakes or drive into work. I mean, that's the thing. It is extraordinary, isn't it? And the question is also, is it the job of Twitter or Facebook or anyone else to police what is written on their platforms? They will argue, look, we have rules of engagement. If you breach them, you're off. So, for instance, Tommy Robinson, Katie Hopkins, they've been banned. Now, I don't agree with either of those bans, but it's not a battle I've wanted to particularly fight just because, I mean, I don't agree with most of what those people say. But they're big enough and ugly enough to fight their own battles, in my view, on this. But is it the job of these social media companies to decide what is and what isn't acceptable speech?
I would say no. And, the great irony of all of this is that the woke left, who are often agitating for these bans, they will say, well, Twitter and Facebook, they're private companies, they can do what they want. And I always think, oh, so suddenly the left favours capitalist property rights over the right of the individual to express him or herself in a public forum. The issue, of course, is that these social media are now huge public platforms. They are the means in which politicians communicate with people. It's the arena in which huge numbers of people express their opinions. So these are not mere private companies. They play a very public role in relation to politics and speech and debate. And when you have that kind of crossover, I do think the onus should be on the social media companies to err on the side of freedom of speech. Because if you get expelled for life from Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, that really does hamper your ability to engage in public life. So we now have, and we've seen Twitter taking down tweets or hiding tweets by Donald Trump. Now, I disagree with many of Donald Trump's statements and tweets, but we can't have a private company unaccountable telling the president of the United States, who was democratically elected, what he is allowed to express to people on Twitter. I think that's a really dangerous road to go down.
Brendan O'Neill, editor of Fact Online, thank you very much indeed.